What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Paper Gain Show. I'm Johnathan Rankin, joined by my co-host, Matt Magee. Matt, what is going on? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I can't wait to dive into the retirement topics that we've got today. Things that we've heard back from clients and people who've reached out as they've listened to the show with some questions. So let's kick it off. Let's dive right into some of the retirement questions that have come in lately.
One of the questions that we hear often is for those that might lose their job a couple years earlier than expected, what to do. And so there are a number of different variables here, depending on your employment, if there's any sort of severance or buyout, the company plans that you have, any number of factors. But any best practices that you have seen? You work with a ton of people in that demographic.
I have unfortunately seen this happen more times than I care to admit. And I think there's so many different layers that people need to really think through when they're working a corporate job, especially a large corporation, if that's where you're at and you have ever seen a reduction in force. Those things happen at large companies. And this is where you want to start thinking about, one, obviously the emergency fund. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's what everybody's going to tell you. Make sure you have that. But if you've been at a company for 25 years, my guess is that you're not necessarily thinking that your job's at risk. So you really want to be thinking, has my company ever done this before? Because your ticket might not have gotten called before, but it may be called at some point. And so then you want to start thinking about the ancillary benefits, the things like healthcare and life insurance. I've seen so many people where their family's life insurance policy has essentially been just a multiplier on a salary that's been a benefit through a job. Well, as you get older, insurance becomes a lot more expensive. And so if you lose your job, well, now you've essentially lost that insurance policy. So starting to do that thinking now of, are you underinsured? Do you need to think about adding an outside policy just for yourself to protect yourself? And then even things like 401k loans that I've seen. I've seen people who have taken a 401k loan for a housing project, and this isn't saying that it's something that we recommend using it for. I always look at a 401k loan as kind of the place of last resort when it comes to trying to tap in for money. But I've seen it happen. And if you lose your job, well, now you have to either continue paying that on the schedule, or you have to pay that back all in full, or it becomes a taxable event because they're just going to take it straight from the 401k. So there's so many different nuances. What have you seen when helping people navigate this?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen everything that you just hit on, but to add some different things to it, potentially claiming Social Security early. Obviously, you have to figure out the health insurance. That's a big piece of it, especially if you're 58 to 60 and you're 5+ years until you can go on Medicare. That's definitely something to consider. Depending on, obviously, COBRA is potentially an option. Then the marketplace, all of those. But yeah, I mean, consulting, finding some sort of, maybe you were an attorney or you were some sort of job that you were making 500,000 and now you're making 100, 200,000, but you've got freedom. So it really just depends on kind of your lifestyle, your skill set, and kind of how far out you were from, call it, your original plan.
Yeah, and I think what I found is that retirement obviously becomes the back burner at that point. I've done retirement planning with people who are 10, 15 years out from retirement. That happens, and now they're, that thought of retiring in 5 years or 10 years, that completely hits the back burner. It's really about trying to reduce the negative impact of the job search. And I've actually seen it happen where it's become a huge benefit for someone because they were able to find a position somewhere else that gave them more fulfillment. And when we looked at they got a severance from a position, and then by the time they got a new position, they almost were able to double dip a little bit. And so they actually made more in a certain year. So depending on your circumstances, it could be actually a positive. But just rethinking the priorities, everything from if you're investing in an after-tax brokerage account, at a certain point, let's say that that's been fully invested into the market, because you've had a position somewhere and that was stable and now that's no longer there. Do you reduce risk as long as it's not a huge tax burden to do so, just to make sure you have just money on the sidelines, that if, let's say, that unemployment gap lasted longer than most people think, if it lasted a year or even 2 years, that's probably not what most people who just recently got laid off are anticipating. They think, well, I know people in the industry, I'll hop back into the job pool, and that I should be able to do that. My guess is that most people who have been at a company for 20 to 30 years, they last updated a resume with a cover page. They probably don't even have a LinkedIn page. So it's a different world out there. And so having to learn those different nuanced skills of the job market today could take longer than anticipated. So I think that's the biggest part of just recognize that it might take a little longer and give yourself that buffer. So it's okay to, I would say, derail the long-term retirement plan, because you've got to get back. You got to get back on solid footing. So I would say just shortening that time frame pretty quickly to start thinking about, how do I cover lifestyle right now? Like I said, the low-hanging fruit's obviously having the emergency fund, doing the budgeting and all that stuff. But if you're 5 to 10 or even 15 years out from retirement and you haven't forecasted, okay, what happens if I lose my job in year 7 and I've got 3 years left until my retirement? What happens then? Those are scenarios that you want to think through, because like I said, we don't want it to happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I've seen it happen so many times, and you just want to not be caught off guard. So that's my biggest piece of advice for someone who's facing that, or even just at a company where you feel like that's even a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. At least, you're just seeing it more and more, especially in these large tech companies. Those are at least the ones gathering those headlines. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's nothing else I would add there. But along those lines, what to do if you have a pension that's terminated, or and you're kind of given the option of a lump sum or continue to annuitize it and get that stream of income. I know you've worked with a number of engineers and just corporate retirees that have this. I've got some experience as well, but I guess to kick it off, I would say it really just depends on kind of your family situation, risk tolerance, if you want to take on that investment burden, or if you feel more confident having somebody else do that. What do you think?
Well, for most people, if you didn't have an election option in the very beginning, so let's say that you started taking your pension 8 years ago, and at the time you didn't have a lump sum option, because not all pensions have that. This at least gives you the opportunity to think through that process and just run the numbers on both sides. Does it make sense? And take into account your family. For example, if you're married and you've got kids that you want to make sure you're leaving assets to, then the lump sum might be something to think about. If you're single and you don't have kids, and then that guaranteed income stream might give you that sense of, I would say, security, that if you couple that with Social Security. So it really depends on the individual circumstance, but most people, it'll give them at least an opportunity. It's an exciting time, because you now get to rethink that decision. If you made the decision prior, hey, I'm going to take the guaranteed income stream, and you've taken that and you've had experience with that for 5 or 6 years now, and now you get this buyout package, and you're thinking, okay, well, I know what that life is like. Reflect on that. How was that? If I can have the lump sum, were we using all of the money that was coming in? I've seen so many times where people, they've got this guaranteed income stream, but they're saving money every single month, so they're just not spending it all. Well, then you might as well take the lump sum, take smaller distributions, let that grow, and now you've got this legacy asset as well that can carry on. So I think it gives you an extra time to plan for that, because I've seen so many people wrestle with that decision. Do I take the benefit on a monthly annuity, or do I take a lump sum? And that's, I think, usually where I like to show both when we're planning, and then go with the answer that is best for the family. But this gives you a chance to redo that whole scenario.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. It does get the second bite at the apple, if you will, on evaluating.
I remember that happened a lot in 2008. A lot of the
Yeah,
autos went through that, and
Lockheed,
yeah, and that was
uh,
that was a time where I saw so many people that got to rethink that decision, and I would say most of them opted to go with that, the second side of it, take the lump sum. I would say that, if you're going through that, my guess is that a big chunk of that, there's going to be some fear involved about whether or not, if you keep the monthly annuity, or the fund's going to be there for you. Just because if it's going through a buyout already, there's fear that is there really an issue underlying that? And so, I would just, like I said, I would just make it the decision based on what your financial plan needs, what your family needs are, and then, what's life been like since you've been on the pension.
yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the good thing, if this is relevant to your situation now, is versus 08, 09, like that was obviously the GFC. Fear was much more prevalent, and
Yeah.
so people should be able to make a much clearer decision given the stability, knock on wood, that we have.
Don't jinx us, Matt. I don't want to go through that
I
again.
know.
Don't do it.
I'm sorry. Uh,
No.
yeah. All right. You want to hit the last topic?
Yeah, go ahead. Dive into it.
All right. It's really just kind of those unexpected things for, like, say you're a pre-retiree, and obviously we work with both those that are a few years away from retiring and those that have been in retirement for potentially decades. So what are some of those unexpected things that come to mind for you that you've seen?
Yeah, so some of the unexpected things I've seen retirees deal with that they didn't expect to deal with. The first biggest one is family. And it's the need to take care of either older parents, continuing to take care of children who maybe are still trying to find their way, and then also becoming almost a pseudo nanny for grandkids. And that
Yeah.
wasn't built into the financial plan. That wasn't built into the, hey, I'm going to retire and go travel and spend my life doing the things I want to do. It's now I become a caregiver. Now I become a nanny. And it's thinking through that stuff early on, because most people don't think that there's a cost associated with that. But I mean, you've got young kids, I've got young kids, and we both know that there's a cost associated with kids, as well as even just the cost of getting to someone's, if you're caring for them, getting to their home, helping them. I've just seen so many people have to care for their parents that they weren't anticipating, and it becomes this second job that you're not paid for. And so I think if that's at all even on the table in you're a pre-retiree, just having those conversations with your parents of, okay, what happens if someone needs help here? Having those real dialogues with your kids about, hey, look, I'm retiring. I love my grandkids, but I didn't sign up to be a full-time nanny. So don't have those expectations. And I've seen so many family dynamics that's something that's not financial. The whole Social Security decision, that's not the decision that you're going to wrestle with when you're already retired for 3 to 4 years. It's, I didn't get to really travel because I've been spending so much time caring for mom. Those are the things that I think are often overlooked. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, those all hit very close to home. I mean, I've relied on my in-laws as well as my parents for childcare for they've been a tremendous help on both sides. But yeah, like asking for somebody, even just like weekend help sporadically is one thing. But like during COVID, like both of our moms helped out effectively 4 days a week, like
Mm-hmm.
while Aaron worked. That was a that worked for the first grandkid. That didn't work for the second. So just little things like that. So all of that hits home. But I guess to further the family point would just be that health aspect of just uh, not only dealing with parents, but unexpected, uh, like an unexpected cancer diagnosis. Sadly, I've seen some people that a year into retirement get cancer or
Mm-hmm.
something unexpected. Uh, that's call it the most common one, but
Yeah,
uh,
but I've even seen things like people, they have this vision of retirement, and
yeah,
everybody does. Everybody, because that's the only way that you really plan for anything is that you think through, okay, I'm no longer going to work on next Monday and I'm retired. Here's what my life's going to be like. And usually it's not that. There's a part of what your expectations are, but then there's different things. If your plan was to travel, I've seen most people who had all these big travel plans and they end up taking more frequent, smaller trips. Or they had an idea of how, of the hobbies that they were going to have in retirement, and then they completely find new hobbies. And so, I think that when we're talking about the financial side of those impacts, I think holding off any huge purchases until you're in retirement, and because you hear people buying that second home, prior to retirement, or they're buying all the gear for their hobbies, prior to retirement. I would get into retirement life and see what that looks like. I mean, I had a client who bought a second home. They went to move to that state, moved states. They had two homes, and they end up realizing we don't really like living here full time. So now we're going to move back. And then you end up taking a loss on that first home, because it was such a short transaction period. So
yeah,
really thinking through big major purchases and even delaying those by maybe a little bit just to experience what retirement is in reality. And then what do you need to do to make sure that you're truly living that retirement lifestyle that you want? Because the last thing you want to do is be handcuffed to a new home or a big purchase that you made because now you feel bad that you made the purchase. So I think big
yeah.
purchases are another thing I've seen people really wrestle with as well.
Yeah, I guess to somewhat take the other side of it, like another way to do that is just kind of in the example of somebody buying the second home, like if you've enjoyed going somewhere for your entire life, like figuring like maybe buying that house a couple years before while you still had that income versus like delaying it till you retire potentially could help
Yeah.
solve that. So I've seen that, but I think yeah, I guess in that specific situation, like if you're moving, I guess to tie it back to family, say your kids moved across the country and now you're moving to be closer to them. I've largely seen that work. I've seen people that end up in areas they don't really like
Yeah.
and they kind of suck
Yeah.
it up, but that's pretty common.
Well, it's
But
funny because there is this point where you do have to consider that you're not having that income stream anymore. So qualifying
yeah,
for loans might be a little more difficult. So,
yeah,
when I talk about big purchases, it's really just being mindful of what those are. Because let's say if you need a new car, it might be more advantageous to do it while you are working. Or if you are buying a second home, just make sure it's in a place that you really, really, really like. I've just seen too many
yeah,
people do that and they realize I don't want to spend every vacation trip there. My goal was to travel, not just to travel to one destination. So
yeah.
that's that's just one takeaway that I've seen happen too often. But ultimately, retirement's about just living the life that you want, and by the time you get there, you've earned it. You've saved. You've done all the financial planning. Live your life. But these are just mistakes and things that I've seen people look back on and go, I wish I didn't really do that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I guess one final quick point to drive that point home, if you will. Like I met with somebody last week that, well, the individual, call it 15 million net worth, uh, building a lake house. They're could be taking an early retirement. So, what to do with kind of that lake house mortgage? Eh, Obviously, this individual could get a mortgage either way, just based on the assets. But it's, I guarantee you, it would be easier to do it when you have that W-2 income.
100%.
And so, just kind of locking that in, even if you pay it off in a couple years. So, it
Yeah,
just kind of gives you that additional flexibility.
100%. There's so much that about retirement planning that's not, Social Security, investing, withdrawal strategies, and taxes. There's just so
Yeah.
much around it, and that's what we're here for. So if you are thinking about retirement, or it's on the horizon, or you recently retired, reach out. We'd be happy just to give you a second set of eyes. I mean, we've been doing this for a very long time and have helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people get to retirement and live successfully. So we'd be happy to help you and chat with you. And our contact information is in the description below. And Matt, this is fun. I always enjoy these conversations and look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of our newsletters will be in the comments as well. That's kind of an easy next step.
Yeah,
And so I just wanted to put that in there as well. And we will see you in a week or two.
absolutely. See you soon.